Okay, ready to get started here. I'm Jim Harrison, and I'm ready to do this. Is my first live stream here on LinkedIn. And what I've promised you for this one is to talk about using chemistry to create incredibly cool essential oil formulas. I didn't title it that way, but that's basically what I'm going to do. If you're not familiar with who I am, Jim Harrison, like I said, I'm an essential oil strategist. I've been doing this for 30 years. 16 of those years, I was teaching at a university. I created and taught a certificate program at a medical university. And I've also co-founded a skincare company. And we were in Whole Foods and, a lot of top-notch retailers, as well as in spas. So plant-based skincare is something that really got me motivated and really was where my start was. But then I got into essential oils and I became obsessed because they are so amazing. I've been teaching around the world, internationally recognized as an educator. I've also have written 3 books. And one of those books is based on what I'm going to be talking about today, which is essential oil chemistry. So let me get started with that. And what I'm going to do is I am going to explain essential oil chemistry and explain how to use essential oil chemistry through the process that I learned essential oil chemistry. So just to give you an overview of where this is all coming from. Like I said, I've been doing this for about 30 years. When I started, I was able to be mentored and taught by some of the top aromatherapists at the time, and even still, people like Pierre Francombe, Dr. Daniel Penawal, and a guy who became a very dear friend of mine, Kurt Schnaubel. These are the 3 main guys. Now, all of those are pretty much the people who brought French aroma medicine to the world. They're the main teachers in French aromatherapy. And what French medical aromatherapy is, it's all about using essential oils on a more medical basis. It's, in a way, it's very pharmaceutical-like. And so that process involves the science, studies, and chemistry. You really need to understand the chemistry in order to understand French aroma medicine. Pierre Francombe and Daniel Penawal wrote a book called L'Aromathérapie Exactement. I don't know if I'm saying that with the right French whatever, but that's the name of the book. And in that book, Pierre introduced his structure effect diagram. Now, with the structure effect diagram, it's based on what's called functional theory and or functional group theory. And functional group theory is about the molecular groupings and how to judge or anticipate the therapeutic properties coming from each individual group. And so I'm going to show you a chart in a minute here. So I'm not going to leave you just like kind of guessing what I'm talking about. So in functional group therapy or functional group theory, what Pierre did was he introduced a chart, structure effect diagram, that showed where these groups show on this specific chart. The chart is based on the polarity. So polarity is basically the molecule's ability to bind with water. So polarity on either side, you have nonpolar, which is also called dry, and then you have polar, which is called wet. I don't know why they call it wet, but that's what he did. And then, that's the horizontal line. And then vertically, you're looking at electromagnetic charge. And so on this chart, at the top is a negative electromagnetic charge. At the bottom would be a positive electromagnetic charge. Now, how the groups are placed within this chart shows the group. Now, I also didn't mention this, and this is very important. When we talk about a group, like as an example, ester group, the esters is a group, but in that group, there are a lot of individual molecules. When we talk about lavender and its calming effect, we're mainly talking about a molecule or a compound called linylyl acetate. Linylyl acetate belongs to the ester group. So when we talk about the grouping, there's a list of compounds. in that group. I'm going to be naming some of these when I go through the process of how I created a blend based on chemistry, which is what this little talk is all about. So that's the structure effect diagram. Basically, that's how Pierre created it. There's a lot more information, but I don't really want to get into that too much. But because I'm going to be showing it to you, I want to, give you the introduction on where I'm going. So with French aroma medicine, this is kind of the basis. It's all about the molecular structure of the oil, understanding what the properties will be based on, or primarily based on, because it's not all based on the therapeutic properties of the molecule, but that's kind of the main theme. When I learned this it was Kurt Schnaubelt who I first learned about the structure effect diagram from, and then took a class with Daniel Penewald and also took a class with Pierre Francombe. All of them, Daniel not so much, but it's definitely Pierre and Kurt. When you look at their work, you see a lot of structure effect diagram or functional group theory used within their context of what they're talking about. And so when I learned the chemistry and learned about the structure effect diagram, which again, I'm going to show you, so you'll see what I'm talking about. It was difficult to comprehend. And when you try to comprehend the chemistry, there are a lot of molecules that we're looking at. Okay, so the grouping is very simple, and for me it became a guide, but it didn't help me enough. I wasn't able to process the information. So what I wanted to do was to learn chemistry a little bit more in depth. So I went back to, the Chemistry 101 just to get the basics on chemistry. What is our valence shells? What are how are molecules built, in the binding and all of these things. So I really went into basic chemistry to learn it. That didn't help me too much, but it gave me a good foundation to learn from. And from that, what I went to is I went to the structure of each molecule as far as the essential oil molecules. Like I mentioned, linolyl acetate, what is the structure there? It's an ester. An ester defines a certain molecular structure, as does the terpene molecules, which is kind of the foundation of all the molecules found in essential oils. There's two different groups. There's phenylpropanoids, and then the main grouping is terpenoid compounds, so terpenes. And we have a group called monoterpenes. And basically the monoterpenes it's a 10 carbon atom structure. This is all the stuff I teach you in my chemistry classes. Okay, so I'm going to just throw it at you for now, and then we'll get into how I worked with it. So the monoterpenes, it's basically carbon and hydrogen atoms that form a molecular structure based on a 10 carbon atom chain. And there's a certain structure that defines, there's alpha pinene, there's beta pinene, there's terpenine, there's all these different compounds that fall into the monoterpene hydrocarbon grouping. And there's sesquiterpenes, and that gets into 15 carbon atoms, and you're going to see all these molecular groups. Now, how do you deal with all this, right? I'm throwing all this information at you. If you've studied essential oil chemistry a little bit, you may know what I'm talking about. If you've never heard any of these terms before, it's just useless, right? And so I was kind of on the fence with that. It was helpful, but it took a lot of study to understand it. Now, another thing I want to tell you is that in the last handful of years, a lot of the leading aromatherapy experts like Robert Tisserand came out and said functional group theory is not valid. And so they're basically all the stuff that I just told you about, where Pierre came up with the electromagnetic charge, and it defines certain properties of the molecules and the molecular groupings. These guys are just throwing all that out. They're saying it's not valid. It doesn't really work. And that helped me to understand a little bit more about my original challenge. Now, I know and understand that this structure effect diagram and the functional group theory doesn't necessarily, it's inconsistent. And that made it really challenging. That was one of the things that made it challenging for me. It was inconsistent. I couldn't figure it out because you have certain rules, but then you get another molecule or another oil, and it either it doesn't follow those rules or it's complete opposite of those rules. that can be confusing. But if you've ever read any of my posts on LinkedIn or any of the things that I write in my books, I love how confusing and contradictory essential oils are. And there's a reason for those contradictions, and it's because there's times and there's situations and there's ways of using oil that can change the behavior. Okay, so that's a whole nother talk that I'll do here on my stream live. But for now, just understand that, yes, it is inconsistent and sometimes just makes absolutely no sense and doesn't work. And so you have to just throw all the functional group theory out with the structure effect diagram. But no, you can actually use the structure effect diagram and functional group theory as a guide to learning chemistry. And that's what I did with all of this information that, first of all, didn't quite click and make sense. And then I find out that it's inconsistent and contradictory. And how do you put all that together? I'm going to explain how I did that by creating a blend that I made for a friend. So first, let me give you that story on how I decided to develop a blend based on chemistry, which is basically what I did here. So a friend of mine comes to me and asks, she said she fell off her bike and she wanted to know if I had a blend that I could make for her. This is very early on in my essential oil career. I actually owned a hair salon and a spa at the time, which is how I found out about essential oil. So I was still early, when I still owned my business, I was still early in essential oils. I think I was maybe 2 or 3 years into it. And so what I thought about first, now this is basically how I do all of my blends anyway. So the process that I have for blending is, what is the goal? So the goal for this, she fell off her bike. Well, I don't have a goal for reversing her falling off of her bike, which that'd be cool, wouldn't it? Reverse, history. Anyway, the process we have to look at here is, what does it mean to fall off your bike? Well, she had bruises, scrapes. I don't remember if she had any cuts, but basically, skin healing, and inflammation, pain. So these are the things that you're gonna think about. Well, you fall off your bike, this is what's gonna happen, right? You're gonna have some wounds and you're gonna have some pain and it's gonna hurt and you're gonna be a little stressed from it. So I put that together. This is what my goal is now, is to reverse the inflammation, reverse the pain, and basically anti everything that I just mentioned as what is going on in this wound or in falling off your bike. So I have my issues, and now I need to solve those issues. How do I solve those issues? Well, I solve those issues by having the right properties that would address those issues. So first is your focus of your blend, your goal, okay? And so what I just named was, inflammation, wounds, stress are the three things that we're going to just put in there as the conditions that we want to resolve. Now, what are the properties of the oils that we have that will resolve these issues? Inflammation. We need anti-inflammatory. That's a big one in this one. For pain, we need analgesic properties. And for the stress, we want to reduce the stress that goes along with falling off your bike, which, I don't know if she was really stressed, but, there's going to be conditions of an emotional impact. Okay. So that's what I want to address there. And I'm not calling it stress. We can call it emotional impact. So now we have the properties that we need. And the properties that we need in inflammatory, wound healing, I forgot to put that one up. Wound healing, anti-inflammatory, nervous system. We'll just focus on soothing the nervous system, and the pain relief, which is the analgesic, is what we need. So now we have the properties. So how do we find out what oils will resolve those properties? Because that would be your next step. You want to choose the essential oils that will resolve or have the properties to resolve the conditions that you're looking for. So this is, again, this is my process for every blend that I make. Now it can shift depending on what my goal is, but the basic structure steps that I have for blending is the goal, which we've defined, the properties of the oils that we need to resolve those issues, which we just defined. And now we need to select the oils. And in my class, actually, before we select the oils, because this is a chemistry talk, I'm going to include that here because that is my third step. What's the goal or the focus? What are the properties that we need? What are the chemical compounds that will give me those properties? So we're not even at the oils yet. We're talking about the chemical properties or the chemical compounds we need with the properties to resolve the issue that we're trying to deal with. So we've got analgesic properties. We need anti-inflammatory properties. We need wound healing properties or skin cell, specifically regenerative properties. And we need analgesic. Now, I can go into a book, which is how I got started. And I recommend that if you're just starting out with essential oils, books are one of the best ways to do this, or, get on the internet. And what I want to add with that is that not everybody knows what they're talking about, even in some books, okay? So with that information, knowing that there's people that don't know what they're talking about, can we take their advice? Yeah, why not? Because, every time you read what somebody is talking about as far as resolving an issue with essential oils, it just gives you some ideas, okay? Now, you should have resources that you absolutely trust. I like to think that I'm one. Kurt Schnabel, Pierre Francombe, especially if you can read French, because both his books, he has a new book out, came out a couple of years ago, and that's also only in French. Now, I can go through those books because a lot of the terms for illness, for the essential oils, for properties and everything else, they come from Latin-based, and so you can kind of work through and find your way through a book if you don't speak the language, as long as it's in Latin-based. If you're speaking English, any other language, I don't know what you do if you're trying to figure French out. Now, books, like I said, Pierre Francombe is one of my resources, Kurt Schnabelt, myself, but just look it up, see what you find. And what you're going to find is that if you're looking up anti-inflammatory, people are going to give you a list of anti-inflammatory essential oils. Okay. What you're also going to get maybe are some of the compounds that will also have the properties that you're looking for, depending on the book. Some books are a little more chemistry intensive. Some books are, kind of more, I'm going to say consumer based, or people that really have no knowledge of the chemistry. They just want to know, what essential oil do I need for this solution? But those books are helpful. And they're going to give you some ideas. Now recipes also are available. That's one of the ways I also worked, is I found some recipes and I would make the recipes and try them out. That's actually the best way to learn about essential oils. Follow some recipes and then use them. And then you're going to come up with your own conclusions about the effectiveness of that recipe. And when you're doing that, you want to, if you're going to document this, you want to know who the person is that you're using these oils on, because you're never selecting oils for the symptom. You're always selecting oils for the person with the symptoms. Okay, that's very important. Now, how did I go ahead and do this blend? This is way before I had my steps, okay? It's partly how I started developing my teaching, though, but it was by doing. And in this doing process, my friend fell off her bike. She asked me if I had a blend. I said, of course I do. And I figured out what the goal is, or the focus. What do I want to resolve? I figured out what the properties are that I need. Then I decided not to think at all about what oils to include in that formula. Instead of thinking about the oils, I decided I'm going to build this blend based on chemistry. Now, how do you base a blend on chemistry? I'm going to tell you. That's what I'm here for. How do you blend based on chemistry is I use the structure effect diagram. I used it based on the knowledge that I had at that time. So I was not dismissing the accuracy of the structure effect diagram because I didn't really understand the inaccuracies of it. And I didn't really understand why it didn't work. I only knew that this was presented to me by my mentors and my teachers, that this was the way you understand and predict what an essential oil is going to do based on the chemical compounds and based on the structure effect diagram, which I said I'm going to show you in a minute. But first, I want to show you the blend that I created from this. And it's a blend that I actually sell now. And I have that up on my website. And it's really one of the first full-on blends that have carried me through my whole career, because it's been one of the most effective blends I've ever made. And so I'm going to show you this in a pipette, because I want you to see the color, which is a really, really deep blue. It's not looking quite as pretty as it does when you have a light behind it, and I don't have a light. And it smells, you might call it minty, but there's the mint. No, that's not really what the smell is. I'm going to explain that smell in a second. All right, so you just looked at it, so you saw what the color is, which is the main thing I wanted to show you. Now let me show you the process. So I'm going to pull up. Now I also want to tell you here that I am available if you want to talk about this. This is my email address. If you want to go to the website, it's at jimharrison.com. But support@jimharrison.com is the email address if you want to connect with me and get a little more information here about anything. So I'm going to go back to this. Okay. This is a structure effect diagram. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of that banner. Hold on a second. That's not what I want. Hide that. Yes, we're good like that. See, for first time, not so bad that I've got getting this figured out, huh? Cool. Anyway, here we are. Structure effect diagram. All right, so I have this filled in a little bit with, and I have several different charts on this, okay? And in my book, I have a book called Easy Essential Oil Chemistry. And in my book, I go through this whole process that I'm going to show you. When I was teaching at Bastyr University, the medical university I was talking about, and had my certificate program, I had a 3-day course on chemistry. And my book, Easy Essential Oil Chemistry, is based on that book, the structure that I developed from teaching chemistry. And as I was teaching the chemistry, I found that I had to change slightly the way I was presenting the information, because I was at a medical university, but I was outside of the academic curriculum. So I had several people from a non-scientific background, and I had to teach, bioengineers and doctors, NDs, chiropractors, acupuncturists, traditional Chinese medical practitioners. And I had an accountant, and I had, herbalist, and I had, people who just wanted to learn how to do this at home. And so I had a real mix of in my audience, but I was teaching essential oils. And so it didn't matter the background, because teaching essential oils, you're teaching specifically about the oils. Okay. Now, when I got questions, I could address the professional background of each individual, but this was all about the essential oil. So the way I wanted to teach the chemistry was so that I didn't simplify it so much that, the doctors and NDs would kind of go, boring. But I didn't want to lose the people with no scientific background. So when I tell you I have several different structure effect diagrams, it was a process on how to understand how this works. So I'm just going to show you this one for now. And what we have going on here, I already talked about the negative and the positive charge. And so that's that vertical area. And you have the horizontal line where if you were right in the middle where the two lines connect, you're at a neutral, negative, positive, neutral charge. So no charge in that center part. And also it's balanced in its polarity. And that's that dry, wet side. And that really should say on the dry, it should say nonpolar, meaning it doesn't bind with water. And then on the wet side, it should say polar, which is there's variations on the polarity, meaning that, some oils will have a slight ability to bind with water molecules. Some will have a little stronger ability to bind, but essential oils overall, even the polar molecules really do not blend in water or aren't soluble. They're going to float on the top. They're going to separate from the water. Even though you're going to see, the things that are more polar tend to look more like an oil slick where they sit on top of the water, where the really nonpolar molecules tend to beat up a little bit more. It's a visual thing in case you needed one. So that's the chart. That's the way that works. And the negative, positive charge, the wet and the dry. Now, also in the structure effect diagram, when you learned about the structure effect diagram, what you're going to find is where it says negative, that's also listed as calming. And so the idea here is the more negative the charge, the more calming that molecule will be. The more positive the charge, the more energizing the molecule will be. Now, that's one of the things that's not very consistent in this. There are certain areas, like when we talk about esters, the terpene backbone esters, okay? I told you there's two groups, phenylpropanoids and terpenes. So those esters with the terpene backbone tend to be the calming molecules. I already mentioned lavender and linalool acetate. That is very well known to be a calming molecule. All right. So we have some guidance here where the chart works. Okay. When I tell you about this blend, I'm going to tell you that the chart absolutely works because my blend is very, very effective and I based it on the chemistry. So this is what I mean by basing it on the chemistry. I used this chart to select the oils. But again, I did not select oils. I selected chemical compounds. Excuse me. So where do we begin? Let's begin with inflammation. I needed an anti-inflammatory. So what I did was I created an anti-inflammatory, or not created, but I used and built into this an anti-inflammatory structure. The way I did that was by choosing from this molecular group right here to the right, the blue group, the sesquiterpene hydrocarbons. Sesquiterpene hydrocarbons are a group that is pretty consistently known to be anti-inflammatory. The blue is an interesting color to observe because there's a compound called camazoline. Camazoline is in German chamomile. German chamomile is oftentimes called blue chamomile. The way it gets its blue color is through the camazoline, which is a sesquiterpene hydrocarbon. And sesquiterpene hydrocarbons are anti-inflammatory. Camazoline is very well known and very effective as an anti-inflammatory compound. And it's the color blue. So whenever you see a blue color oil, you know that it has camazoline in it, and you know it's going to have anti-inflammatory properties. The main oils that have that are the German chamomile, like I've already mentioned, blue tansy, or what I call tanacetum, because that's the plant name actually, Tanacetum annuum. Blue tansy is also called blue chamomile. So it's a very deep, the differences in the color is the blue tansy is almost a steel blue color. It's a little bit deeper and darker. The German chamomile is a prettier translucent blue. It's almost a sky blue color. And I have an oil, Cape Chamomile, that has a slight amount of camazoline, but just enough to give it a pretty blue color. It's a really nice oil. and blue yarrow, and then there's cypress, blue cypress. So these are oils that would have chemagiline in it, and chemagiline is a sesquiterpene hydrocarbon, and the sesquiterpene hydrocarbon means that it's an anti-inflammatory. So number one, I did not pick an oil. I picked chemagiline. I haven't told you what oil I chose that has chemagiline in it yet. Now, we also have as another important property, wound healing. And one of the more cell regenerative groups is right here, the ketones. Now, not all the molecules in that ketone group are wound healing. And so what we do is we look at what compounds are known to be wound healing. There's a diketone that's in the oil helichrysum. That's a very powerful wound healer. And so what I did was I'm thinking the chemistry, but I'm also ready to go with an oil on this one, because this was just the absolute obvious have to have it choice would be helichrysum. Helichrysum has other names. It's called Everlast. It's also called Immortelle. Most people now are calling it helichrysum. All right, so we have the helichrysum with the diketone, and that ketone is a really potent cell regenerative oil, incredibly good for wound healing, really good for wound healing. Anytime you have an injury, just go with helichrysum. Rosemary verbenone. Verbenone is a ketone and a cell regenerative ketone. Now, I'm giving you a name, rosemary verbenone, and it's actually rosemary CT verbenone or rosemary chemotype verbenone or rosemary verbenone type. These are all the different ways you may see that phrased. And what all of that means is that it's rosemary essential oil from the plant Rosmarinus officinalis. Now that plant, depending on where it grows, the pretty much the geographical location and elevation of where the oil grows, it changes its chemical structure. So it's one of those plants where it can significantly have different chemical structure depending on where and what height and all that it was grown in. So with rosemary verbenone, the Rosmarinus officinalis plant, with this specific distillation from a specific geographical location, has a higher amount of the ketone verbenone. So when I choose rosemary verbenone, what I'm talking about is I want the rosemary with the higher ketone content of verbenone, because that ketone content has good cell regenerative properties. Following that? So rosemary verbenone, another ketone that I could choose. Now, what I would do is in my process, I will list long, just as many oils and chemical compounds as I can think of. I'm just going to give you what I ended up putting in my formulation. Okay. So I've just given you two oils, rosemary verbenone ketone group, and I haven't told you what oils I use for the sesquiterpene hydrocarbon yet, but I showed you blue. And what that means is I have chemagiline in my formula. So I choose one of those oils that I mentioned to you. Now, the other thing that I knew I needed to have was a pain reliever and analgesic. And so when I was thinking about what analgesic do I need? Well, lavender can be a good pain reliever. Helichrysum also has good analgesic properties. And so there are a handful of molecules that can give us analgesic properties. The oxide, here's the oxide group right in the middle. Generally, when you think of oxide, there's really only one compound that is most identifiable, and that is 1,8-cineol. Now, there's actually a rosemary that's rosemary chemotype 1,8-cineol. When I pass that around in my classes, and I don't tell people what the oil is that they're smelling, I want them to experience it first. So I pass an oil around with 1,8-cineol in it. People smell it, and immediately they respond by, "This is eucalyptus." And go, no, it's actually rosemary 1,8-cineol type. The 1,8-cineol is an oxide compound. The 1,8-cineol is also called eucalyptol. Eucalyptol is eucalyptus. When you smell eucalyptus, that's what you're smelling. That's the identifying compound in eucalyptus. So when most people who aren't familiar with a lot of essential oils, but generally are familiar with eucalyptus, when they smell 1,8-cineol in another oil, and there's a bay laurel that has a high amount, their brain is going to immediately go to eucalyptus. So I could use eucalyptus in my blend. I don't know if I did or not, but I could have. Now, I have my analgesic, I have my wound healer, I have my anti-inflammatory, and then I want to do some calming to the nervous system or soothing the nervous system, which goes along with being analgesic. And so my ester group, that's right up here. We mentioned it. I didn't really show you where it was, right up there at the top. The ester group is going to give you qualities of really balancing or soothing the central nervous system. And so I also look at the esters as reducing spasms. And falling off a bike, could there be spasms? Sure. So I didn't even ask what all the symptoms were. I just sort of played with, what if I fell off my bike? What would I be dealing with? And spasms are a potential. So I wanted to add some of that. So now what I have is I have my chemical structure of what I need. I want esters, I want ketones, I want sesquiterpene hydrocarbons, and I could also go with oxides because I did mention them as analgesic, but this is my basic structure. So now I know what the chemical compounds are. Now, I had mentioned that this is about learning the chemistry and using the chemistry. This is the process I started using all the time when I started putting blends together. I'm always thinking of the chemical compounds that I need. Now, in my class, and actually in my book, Easy Essential Oil Chemistry, I talk about the process you go through in learning how to select individual molecules. And so some molecules don't fit the chart. That's where this comes. It's not consistent, okay, like I said. And this is why those guys like to throw out the functional group theory, because they figure, well, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, no, we're going to keep the bathwater and we're going to use it as a guide. And so this is what I'm teaching you right now. How did I use the chemistry as a guide? And this is how I did it. Now I can look at the individual molecules. I already mentioned verbenone and that diketone and chemagiline. I can mention many other molecules that I could put in this formula. So I did. Here's the process. Here's how I did this. Here's the kind of work that I was doing. So now I'm choosing the chemistry. Now I got to figure out what oils. Now I've already mentioned some of the oils, right? I have helichrysum. I have eucalyptus, and I didn't mention this, but lavender is what I use mainly for my ester. So now I have some oils that I'm starting to list. Now I talked about the blue. What do I want to be blue? What I'm going to do for the blue is I'm going to use the German chamomile, but I'm also going to synergize that with the blue tansy. Now, partially I do that because German chamomile is a lot more expensive than blue tansy. So whenever I make a blend, because I know I'm going to be selling it, I want to be aware of what the blend is going to cost. Like I can do a really high end, if you want to give me a lot of money, yeah, I can make you some beautiful blends that would be really expensive, but it's just not necessary. Okay. So blue chamomile and the blue tansy are what I now have for the inflammation. But I wanted to go a little bit further. And so I used the copaiba, which sometimes I call copaiba because it just sounds like more fun. Copaiba has a compound that's a sesquiterpene hydrocarbon called caryophyllene, beta-caryophyllene. Now, caryophyllene has been found to bind with the endocannabinoid receptors in the surface of the skin, which creates an anti-inflammatory response, which we know from the CBDs, the cannabidiol research that's been done. Those also bind with the same endocannabinoid receptors in the surface of the skin, creating an anti-inflammatory. So the copaiba is a good choice. And it also gives me a nice balance in the way that I want to blend for fragrance. Now, here's where we're going to get a little bit off the chart. So I'm choosing wintergreen. I should have explained that when I talked about esters, because I didn't choose wintergreen. I chose the compound methyl salicylate, which is the compound that they changed a molecule or so, and Bayer created aspirin from that same compound. Very good analgesic, powerful analgesic. Methyl salicylate. There are issues, contraindications. You got to be really careful when you're using it because it is an irritant. Now, the methyl salicylate is in the ester group. I talked to you about already, there's two foundational compounds, phenylpropanoids and terpenes. In the ester group, those really are defined as the terpenoid compounds. Now, I do make a couple other groups, or there are a couple other groups that Pierre Francombe listed as specifically phenylpropanoids, though that are the esters and the phenols. Not the phenols, I'm sorry. It's actually the hot phenylpropanoids. And I did not give a separate group for the phenylpropanoid in the ester, but this is where functional group theory kind of falls apart when you're trying to figure this out. So even though methyl salicylate is an ester, it's an ester with a phenylpropanoid compound, so it doesn't have the properties. I don't know if I didn't really talk about the properties, but all of this is the properties that, from Kurt Schnaubelt and Pierre Francombe have been listed as properties for that group. The methyl salicylate is an analgesic, and it's not a very calming compound. Could be if you use it in a blend that way, but it's not like lavender or clary sage or geranium, which are high ester compound containing oils that are really calming, and due to that ester composition that it has. So it works sometimes, the functional group, sometimes it doesn't. Methyl salicylate is one of those where it doesn't, but great analgesic. So wintergreen and birch contain the highest amounts of methyl salicylate. So those are the oils that I want to combine in here. So now, what do we have? We have a blue oil that is tripping on my computer. Don't do that. It's going to work. Actually, I should put that on my skin. I'm going to show you. If my wrist hurt, this would be great. I'd drop a little like so. Oh, you should dilute your oil. This is not diluted, but just as a basic rule, you should dilute your oils. Anyway, smells great. You know what it smells like? It smells like pain relief. There's an odor profile when people smell something that's pain relieving. It generally has methyl salicylate in it. Methyl salicylate can be isolated away from any oil and placed into a pain relieving formula. It's going to have the fragrance of methyl salicylate. So now I have the blue tansy, the copaiba, and the helichrysum, and the rosemary verbenone, and the methyl salicylate, or the wintergreen and the birch. Now, I was challenged because the fragrance was bumping in, that those sesquiterpene hydrocarbons and ketones were bumping into that minty smell. Now, I found that the eucalyptus combined it a little bit, but I'm going to not tell you a secret. There's one compound in there that just married the blend so beautifully for fragrance. And the reason I'm not going to tell you that, I'll tell you if you go ahead and let me pull that up again. Email me. I'll tell you my secret. Okay, maybe I'll have to have a chat with you before I do that, but I'll tell you my secret. The reason I won't tell you the secret, here's what happened. Gary Young, who started Young Living Essential Oils, was in a couple of the classes I was in early on with Kurt Schnaubelt. And I found out a few years later that the blend that I made, and nobody was using methyl salicylate or wintergreen with the helichrysum and the sesquiterpene hydrocarbons when I did this. I could not find any recipes that had this. And with a few of the other oils that I put in there, I'm not giving you a whole list right now because I wanted to give you just the overview. So with that main composition that I did, leaving out the one that I told you I'm not going to tell you, Gary Young's Panaway formula is actually the formula that I made. And then from Young Living, there's another MLM that has a similar formula. What I find interesting about both of those is it looks like they both tried to figure out what the oil was that married the methyl salicylate with the ketones with the sesquiterpene hydrocarbons on a fragrance level. So it's kind of interesting to see that. But, my formula, it just worked, and I do not want to give out that one compound, which happens to also be an analgesic. So the fragrance of this smells very pain relieving and anti-inflammatory. And just by me saying that, you should know what I'm talking about, right? When you think about when you smell somebody walk by and go, oh, they must have a backache, right? Something like that. That's the smell I'm talking about. This actually, fragrance is so important. And so I'm not going to get more into the fragrance. I did that. You want to know about it? Email me. I'll tell you a little more. So we have the formula now, which contains sesquiterpene hydrocarbons, ketones, oxide, esters, and it is beautiful. Another group that I could add to this is the sesquiterpene alcohols, which is kind of hidden right in this area right here. Sesquiterpene alcohols, another larger chain. So sesquiterpene means a bigger molecule, which can tend to have more activity. But there are some really good sesquiterpene alcohols in that group that are anti-inflammatory, powerfully anti-inflammatory. There's one compound called bisabolol. If you have a good German chamomile, you're getting the sesquiterpene hydrocarbon camazoline with the bisabolol, which is a sesquiterpene alcohol. Creates a great synergy. So whenever you think of chemistry, and this is what I'm trying to express to you guys today. I'm trying to show you chemistry here, okay? Because I want you to understand that when you make blends based on chemistry, you are doing phenomenal work. You really are just going beyond anything you can do by not understanding the chemistry, okay? So this blend was built all on chemistry, and I'm telling you to this day, it was one of my most effective blends, which is why some of these companies would decide to borrow it from me. And I say borrow because you don't really steal formulas. I've got a lot of formulas based on other people's work. So that's why I keep that one secret, and it really helps to make it where people can't repeat your formula. So powerful blend based on chemistry. The process I went through is I started with the focus. What do I want? What's the goal? What do I want to resolve? What are the properties? What chemical compounds give me those properties? And that's where understanding the chemistry is so valuable. And then you select the oils that would give you the most of what you're trying to get from the chemical structure, right? So lavender is really diverse. When you get into the chemistry, I can look at lavender and see why lavender just does so many things, because it has a very complex chemical structure. But it's built mostly, and I would say, let's say in the 75 to 80% range. It has very calming, soothing molecules. It's about 40 or so percent of the ester, linalool acetate. So it's really going to deliver on what I need from esters. Now I can look at a lot of different oils, and Roman chamomile, high in esters, the Cape chamomile, high in esters. Oh, I do use Cape chamomile in this formula. One of the reasons I did that is because Roman chamomile and German chamomile is how I started this blend. And then I discovered Cape chamomile, which gives me a really beautiful ester synergy, which I like to use more so than Roman chamomile. And it gives me more of the sesquiterpene hydrocarbon camazoline. It was lower cost at the time than German chamomile and Cape chamomile. So what I did was I used that formula or that oil to bring down my cost. I took out the Roman chamomile because Cape chamomile delivers on the ester structure for me a lot more effectively. And then it lowers how much German chamomile I needed because it has the chemagiline in it. So these are all the factors. When I'm blending, I'm looking at cost, I'm looking at therapeutic effect, I'm looking at color, I'm looking at the fragrance, overall fragrance. Most importantly, I want it to work, okay? But all those levels are important for how that's going to work, okay? We need to always incorporate what I call the holistic essential oil triad. You need to know the olfactory response, the pharmacological or physical responses, and even the metaphysical. What are the energetic properties of this blend? So here's how I did this. I took the chemistry, I picked the oils, I did the blend, I figured out what the what the structure should be, not the molecular structure, but the fragrance structure should be. And I end up with this awesome oil that I call, well, it's good for pain. I'm not going to give you the name because I don't want to, I can't tell you anything because FDA doesn't want me to make claims. And I'm not making claims on a product. I'm telling you how to make an effective pain relieving formula. Okay. So I just gave you partially the recipe and how that would work. So I want you to go ahead and try it. You need a handful of oils. If you email me, okay, let me put my email address back up here again. If you email me, I will help guide you through this. You can also go to my website, jimharrison.com, and we can have a Zoom. I'll give you a 30-minute free Zoom consultation or coaching and, help you decide what oils would be best for you. Anytime you need a 30-minute coaching, I'm there. I do that. No problem. And kind of playing around with this. Wait, I want to get rid of that banner again. You can hide. I already told you. Come and join me. Yeah, so this is basically how I use the chemistry. It was a lot of information. It's I have the book out there, Easy Essential Oil Chemistry. It's on my website. If you want to get a good guide, taking a class is always the best. But do understand and do start researching the chemistry. It's just an incredible way to go. So I think. Let me see. I'm going to go into the comments, see if we have any comments going on. And I see Jennifer's in there. Hi, how's it going? Any questions? If you have any questions, I have had some questions that I did want to answer. It had to do with the methyl salicylate, which I did mention that it is contraindicated, often contraindicated for topical use because it can be an irritant. When you use that at a percentage, and I can't remember the exact percentage I used, but here's what's going to happen. You have the pure essential oil blend. And let's say I have 10% methyl salicylate, either through just wintergreen or a combination of wintergreen and birch. And I have that going on. And if I use that at 10%, I also have chemagiline, sesquiterpene hydrocarbon. I have other oils. So my blend is going to balance any potential irritation coming from methyl salicylate. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean the methyl salicylate doesn't have potential to be irritating. Of course it does. But if you dilute this, so I would say you take this pure essential oil blend, put it in at about 5% in a carrier oil, any carrier oil. Jojoba is great. Sunflower seed. I use a combination of coconut oil with sunflower, with camellia, with castor. Makes for a beautiful massage blend, really good slip and everything else that you need in a nice massage blend. Also penetrates really well. So whatever the blend is that you're going to use, whatever your carrier oil, at 15%, and I mean 15 mils of, if you make a bottle, 15 mils, that's a tablespoon. So if you don't have a bottle that measures it, tablespoon will measure it. If you do about, 15 drops from a dropper, the pipette can use a little bit more And that'll get you to 5% blend. So 15 drops from a orifice reducer coming from your bottle, or about, I'm going to say 20 drops from a pipette in 15 mils or a tablespoon of carrier is going to give you about 15 or 5%. You want 5% essential oil. You could up that to 10% if you need a little more potency. Once you get beyond 10%, I don't know if it's going to be more effective, because the essential oils are really powerful. You don't need a lot of essential oil to make these things work. Okay. That's why, when they say don't use them undiluted, you're just wasting oil. I mean, there is more potential for irritation when you use the oil undiluted, but you're just wasting essential oil. So dilute it. Okay. So that's with the methyl, I can say that, right? Methyl salicylate. Not too much concern on whether that's going to be an irritant. Now, some of the other concerns, I mean, that's kind of the main thing with the main question that I had on this. What I say about essential oils, if you really want to know how they work, just use them. All right. A lot of books will guide you. There's a lot of information, but the way you're really going to know how to use essential oils is just to use them. All right. So I guess I told you a little bit of a story about how I blend, how to blend from chemistry. Again, if you'd like to contact me, you can get me at my website. There's a link that'll give you a free consultation. If you have a spa and you have staff, I actually have some programs that I can also do for you. Contact me, support@jimharrison.com. If you do want some of my blends for your spa, you're going to have to contact me through email, because you get wholesale. I don't really have a lot of my products out there. It's not my focus. My focus is education. I just want to share with you how to best use essential oils and how to get beyond the nonsense that's out there. There's so much information that, and it's hard to say it's inaccurate, but it's just not presented in the way that makes it accurate. Because like I said right at the start, there's a lot of contradictory information in essential oils, and a lot of those contradictions are accurate. It all depends on how you use the oil and what you're doing. So I really appreciate you being here for my first live stream here on LinkedIn. I look forward to seeing you guys again. Thanks so much for joining me here.